Wealthy family rejects a son's pregnant fiancée. They're shocked when her real identity comes to light. The doors of the mansion opened with a soft creak, and the smell of polished wood and faint perfume hit me first. The grandeur of the Parker estate was overwhelming, like something out of a storybook, cold, imposing, and designed to impress. It wasn't the stone columns, the gold fixtures, or the grand staircase that made my chest tighten, though. It was the memory of being here before, all those months ago. The first time I walked into this house, the first time I was judged, and the last time I ever felt small. But today, they would see a different Ava Monroe. "Mother, Father," Lucas greeted, his voice stiff, his hands slightly trembling as he led me into the foyer. I stood still for a moment, letting the sounds of my own heartbeat drown out everything else. I had to remind myself not to shrink, not to let their gazes cut through me the way they had before. Vivian Parker descended the stairs, pearls glinting under the chandelier light, a picture of elegance and ice. She had the kind of smile that could freeze you in your tracks, a smile that said she saw everything you were and everything you weren't. Behind her, George Parker adjusted his cufflinks, his eyes scanning me like I was an inconvenience, an annoyance. "Do you remember Ava?" Lucas asked, voice tight with barely restrained tension. Vivian's smile didn't falter. "Of course," she said, though her eyes roamed over me in a way that made my skin crawl. "And I see she's brought company." The words weren't an observation. They were a judgment. I felt my pulse quicken as I glanced down at my feet. My boots, scuffed and old, were nothing compared to the polished heels of Vivian Parker. And I knew in that moment she was thinking about that very thing. She was thinking about how I didn't belong. My belly, now a visible reminder of my future, became the silent focus of their judgment. But I stood tall. No one would ever make me feel small again. "We're engaged," Lucas said quickly, trying to smooth over the tension, his voice a little too high-pitched. "The baby's due in January." Vivian's smile faltered for the briefest second, but she recovered with a tight nod. George didn't even acknowledge the news. Instead, he straightened, his icy gaze never leaving me. It was as if he couldn't even stomach the idea of me being in his home, let alone carrying his grandchild. "Daniel," George said suddenly, his tone like a cold command, "I need to speak with you, alone." Lucas shot me a glance, worry etched on his face. "I'll be right back," he said, his words barely a whisper. I nodded, holding my ground. No, I wasn't going to be intimidated. Not this time. As he followed his father into the study, the silence between Vivian and me stretched. I didn't look at her, but I felt her eyes on me like a weight. "Ava," she said, her voice laced with something sharp, like it had been honed over years of practice. "What is it that you do?" I knew what she was expecting. I had seen it in her eyes. Freelancer. No real career. No future. "I'm a journalist," I said calmly, meeting her gaze. "Independent." Vivian's lips twisted into a smile, but it wasn't kind. "Independent," she said, as if the word itself tasted foreign in her mouth. "That explains your shoes." I let her words hang in the air. My boots? They were a small part of me, but they had seen more of the world than her pearls had. No, I wasn't going to apologize for them. I didn't flinch. "You're not what we imagined for our son," she continued, her tone soft but laced with disdain. "And this situation? It's unfortunate." I straightened my back. Unfortunate. She had no idea. "This situation," I said quietly, but with force, "is your grandchild." Her eyes widened for just a moment. A flicker of something. Guilt? Crossing her features. It passed so quickly I almost wondered if I imagined it. George returned with Lucas, his face pale, his jaw clenched. "We should go," Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a request. It was an order, one that left me standing there, speechless. He had never been so shaken, never been so overwhelmed by the weight of his family's disapproval. I stood, No protest, no argument. The decision had already been made. We walked out of the mansion, the door slamming behind us, the sound echoing in the air like the final nail in the coffin of any future we might have had in that world. But as the heavy silence of the car surrounded us, I realized something. What they didn't know, the thing that would haunt them forever, was that the name I left behind, the one they had no clue about, was far more powerful than anything they could ever hold. They hadn't just underestimated me. They had underestimated what I had become, and one day, they would regret it. The dinner was a delicate, carefully crafted performance, one where the smiles were too tight, the laughter too forced, and the silence felt like a threat. The Parker estate glimmered with polished silverware and empty pleasantries. Their attempts at civility were so transparent I almost laughed. But the truth was, I wasn't here for their approval. I never had been. I was here to make them see me, not the label they'd given me, not the shoes, not the thrift store boots I wore with pride. Tonight, they were going to see Ava for who she really was. The woman standing before them, proud, unapologetic, and not a mere footnote in Lucas's life. The clink of glass against silver echoed in the background as we sat at the long table, plates of food untouched, the tension thick enough to slice. Vivian's smile was as cold as ever. And George? He barely looked up from his glass of wine, his attention always directed toward the things that truly mattered to him. Lineage, bloodline, legacy. "You must be enjoying the wine," Lucas remarked, trying to break the silence. His voice was strained, like he was trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. "Yes," Vivian replied, her gaze flicking toward me briefly before she turned back to her wine. "It's adequate." Her words cut deeper than she intended, but I didn't react. I didn't need to. They had no idea what they were about to face. "Tell me, Ava," George finally spoke up, his voice so calm, so controlled, it made my skin crawl. "Do your parents live nearby?" I paused. The room went deathly still. I set my fork down, meeting his gaze with a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. "My mother passed," I replied, my voice soft but steady. The words felt like lead in my mouth, but I couldn't afford to flinch. George's eyes narrowed, but he didn't push further. Not yet. "And your father?" Vivian asked, her voice dripping with curiosity, though she masked it behind politeness. "My father lives abroad," I said, letting the silence stretch between us. "Running his company." They leaned in, both of them, curious. The trap was set, and they didn't even know it. "Oh?" George's tone shifted, his interest piqued. "What company is that?" I smiled, not a hint of humor in it. "Bennett Enterprises," I said, my voice low but firm. It felt like the air itself froze. For a moment, no one spoke. I watched as George's fork slipped from his hand, clattering loudly against the plate. I saw the brief flicker of panic in Vivian's eyes, though she quickly masked it with a thin smile. "You're Richard Bennett's daughter?" Vivian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The world seemed to hold its breath. The room, once so full of judgment and superiority, was suddenly paralyzed. They had no idea. They had no idea who I was, what my name truly meant. It wasn't just a name. It was power. It was everything they'd spent their lives coveting. I nodded slowly, my gaze never leaving theirs. "Adopted at birth," I added, my tone a perfect mirror of their own coldness. "Raised as his own." Silence. Thick, long, crushing. Lucas blinked, as if I had slapped him across the face. "Wait." He looked at me, his voice hoarse with disbelief. "You never told me that part?" I shrugged, my eyes never leaving his. "You never asked." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Lucas, his mind racing, turned toward his parents, then back to me. But I could see the shock in his eyes, the realization that everything had changed in a heartbeat. The truth about me, about who I was, had shattered everything he thought he knew. It was all coming undone. The facade of his perfect family, his perfect life, unraveling right in front of him. Lucas began. But George cut him off with a tight laugh, almost too bitter to be called one. We had no idea, George muttered, his face flushing with a mix of surprise and something darker, something that bordered on shame. None of this was mentioned. I know, I said, my voice a quiet challenge. That was the point. It wasn't just my name that had shocked them. It was the realization that I, Ava Monroe, with my scuffed boots and my humble career, was the daughter of a man they could never touch. Richard Bennett had built his empire from the ground up, and they were nothing but small players in a world that would never truly accept them. But I had been playing them, and now they would see. The awkward silence stretched on until Lucas's mother broke it, her voice tight. I don't know what to say. She was trying to recover, trying to mask the defeat in her tone with more pleasantries, but it was clear. The power had shifted. In one moment, everything had changed, and they knew it. Lucas shifted in his chair, his hands clenched, his gaze flickering between me and his parents. He was caught between his love for me and the life he had been raised to believe was his birthright. It was a battle in his eyes, one I could see but not solve for him. I turned away, looking out the window, letting the moonlight spill across the room. You don't have to say anything, I said softly, my voice steady, but inside I was brimming with something fierce and untamable. Just know this. Everything you thought about me, everything you judged me for, it was all a lie. They didn't speak for a long time. What could they say? The damage had already been done. They had underestimated me, and now they would have to live with the consequences. But me? I wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The game had just begun. The days that followed were like a slow-burning fuse, each moment heavier than the last. The phone rang constantly, but I didn't pick up. The doorbell rang, but I ignored it. Invitations to dinner, apologies wrapped in gold leaf, silk baby gifts that I didn't need or want, all sent from the Parkers, desperately trying to patch up what had been broken in that dining room. But I wasn't interested in their apologies. Not now. Not after what they had shown me. The first few calls came from Lucas. He was confused. He was angry. He was apologetic. I let them ring out. Then came the letters, thick, embossed with the Bransford seal, begging for forgiveness, pleading for us to come back. They wanted to make things right. Make things right? The audacity. How could they fix a wound that deep, one that they themselves had inflicted? I didn't care for their apologies. I wasn't their charity case, their project to fix. They wanted to smooth things over now that they knew who I was, now that they knew what I could be. But they hadn't seen me before, not truly. They hadn't seen Ava. Lucas, though, he was different. I saw him retreat into that world he knew so well, the world where status and approval were the currency, where family was supposed to protect you. But what about the truth? What about trust? Didn't that matter too? I stood by the window, watching the sun set over the city, feeling the tension in the air. The silence in our apartment was deafening. The baby's room was ready. I'd prepared everything, but there was a gnawing feeling in my gut, a feeling that no amount of preparation could ever make up for the absence of respect. Lucas came home late that night, his eyes shadowed, his shoulders slumped. He'd been to his parents' house. I knew it before he even said it. They want us to come over again, he said, his voice low. They're offering, well, they want to make amends. I didn't turn to him. I couldn't. What for? I asked, my voice cutting through the air like a blade. For what? So they can look at me and feel better about themselves? His sigh was long and heavy. He stood at the doorway, looking at me. I don't know what you want me to say, Ava. They've realized they made a mistake. They want to fix it. I turned slowly, facing him now. Fix it? My voice was calm, but my eyes were fire. You can't fix what you broke, Lucas. You can't fix what they've done. They looked at me like I was nothing, like I was dirt beneath their shoes. And now because of who I really am, they want to kiss my feet and make it all better? No. The room fell silent again. My words echoed in the stillness, but this time, there was something in them, something raw, something that had been building for too long. Lucas flinched. He wasn't ready for the reality that I was no longer the woman who needed their approval. I wasn't playing their game. 1 week later, the doorbell rang again, but this time, I didn't ignore it. I had expected this. I knew it was coming. When I opened the door, Vivian stood there. No pearls, no heels, just a simple cardigan, her hands shaking as she held a small, wrapped gift. The difference in her demeanor was enough to make me stop, to make me look at her like she was human. "Ava," she said quietly, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, letting her enter. She looked around the apartment, her eyes tracing the modest surroundings. Nothing like the grandeur of the estate she was used to. This was our world, and for the first time, she wasn't looking down on it. "You could live anywhere," she said, her voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "But you chose this, because it's ours, not a palace, but it's home." I nodded, but I didn't speak. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I was tired. Tired of pretending that things could go back to the way they were before. She took a deep breath, her shoulders sagging as if a burden was lifting. "I was cruel, unkind, and wrong." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I judged you for being less." I kept my gaze steady, my heart beating in my chest like a drum. The woman who had once looked down at me with so much disdain was now standing in front of me, apologizing. But was it enough? Was it really enough? She continued, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "And now I realize, you are more than I ever could be." She swallowed hard, clearly struggling with the enormity of what she was saying. "I'm not asking for forgiveness." Her voice dropped, soft and almost pleading. "Just a chance to be better, for the baby." And there it was, the moment. The moment when everything could have changed. The moment where I could have let go of all the bitterness, all the anger, and let her in. Let her be the mother-in-law I had never had. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. "We don't need gifts," I said quietly, my eyes never leaving hers. "We don't need anything but respect." She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Then I'll earn it." She stood up, the apology lingering between us, unspoken yet understood. As she left, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel relief. I just felt emptiness, like I was still waiting for something more, something real. 3 days later. The silence was broken by the sound of a sharp knock at the door. My instincts told me who it was before I even opened it. Veronica. She walked in like she owned the place, tall, blonde, her icy demeanor like a shield. She didn't greet anyone, didn't even glance at Lucas, just locked eyes with me. "This baby is your leverage," she said flatly, her voice cold and sharp, cutting through the air. "Don't deny it." I didn't flinch. "Excuse me?" "You could have told us who you were from day one," she continued, her gaze narrowing. "But you waited, until it suited you." "Number one, I waited because I didn't owe anyone anything, least of all you," I replied, folding my arms across my chest. Veronica's eyes flashed with anger, her fingers tapping against the door frame. "You're threatening the hierarchy," she spat. "Then maybe the hierarchy deserves to fall," I shot back, my words hitting harder than I intended. Her eyes darkened. "Be careful, Ava. Monroe or not, the Parkers don't take betrayal lightly." "Good," I said calmly. "Neither do I." Behind me, I heard the door open. Lucas stood there, fists clenched. He didn't say a word. Just one look, and Veronica knew it was time to leave. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. A soft, uninviting chime. I knew who it was before I even reached for the handle. You don't have to be intuitive to recognize the sound of someone who's about to change everything. When I opened the door, there she stood. Veronica Parker, the family's enforcer, the one who thought she could move through the world like a hurricane, unchallenged and unstoppable. Her icy gaze locked on me, the same way it always had, with a calculation, a contempt, and a power that didn't belong to her. "Can we talk?" Veronica's voice was cold, flat. No pleasantries, no pretense, just business. I didn't invite her in. I didn't need to. She wasn't here for conversation. She was here to send a message. "You've made a lot of noise for someone who doesn't understand the stakes," Veronica continued, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like an executioner's drumbeat. She took a step closer, the distance closing between us with every word. I folded my arms, standing tall. "I know exactly what the stakes are, Veronica, but you're not playing the game anymore. You're losing." Her lips curled into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so cold. She leaned in, close enough for me to feel the chill from her presence. "The baby, that's your leverage, isn't it? You think you can control everything by using the one thing that's closest to him? To Lucas?" I didn't flinch. The only thing I felt was a quiet, simmering fury. Using the baby? No. This was never about the baby. This was about me. This was about finally taking control of a situation I had let slip through my fingers for too long. "Leverage?" I repeated, my voice calm. Too calm. "This baby doesn't give me power over Lucas, Veronica. But you give me power. And you know that." Veronica's eyes narrowed, that flicker of recognition passing through them. The walls around her cracked, just for a second, before they came crashing back into place. "You don't know what you're doing," she spat, her voice low, dangerous now. "You're threatening everything the Parkers have built. Everything. You've already put a crack in the foundation. And believe me, that crack is only going to get bigger the longer you stay here pushing your little games." I stepped forward, never breaking eye contact. "You don't scare me, Veronica. You're nothing but a puppet in your family's play, a pawn in their game of power. But you've been a threat long enough. Time for that to end." Her hand shot out, grabbing the doorframe like she might shove me aside. She was close now, close enough for me to hear her breath, close enough to taste the bitterness in her words. "You have no idea what you're up against," she hissed. "Do you think the Parkers will just let you walk away from this? Do you think your little secret, that name, will protect you forever?" The name she spoke, Richard Bennett's name, my name, was supposed to shield me. But I wasn't hiding behind it anymore. I wasn't hiding behind anything. "You're right," I said, the calm in my voice almost mocking. "I don't think they'll let me walk away. But I know that the family you protect, they'll fall, because they never saw me for who I really am. And now, they never will." For a split second I saw it in her eyes, fear. Not the kind that came from weakness, but the kind that came from realizing she had miscalculated. She had thought she could intimidate me, break me, make me bow to her will. But Veronica? She didn't understand. She was playing by their rules. And those rules? They didn't apply to me anymore. She took a step back, her face hardening, the mask of control slipping back into place. "You think you can control the situation," she said, her words venomous. "But you're playing with fire, Ava, and when you get burned, when it all comes crashing down around you, you'll have no one to blame but yourself." Her gaze flicked toward Lucas, who had appeared in the doorway, silently watching the entire confrontation. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. I turned to him, standing between him and Veronica like a shield. And in that moment, I realized how far I had come, how far I had fallen into their world, and how much I had to lose. "I'm done with this," Veronica muttered, turning on her heel. She glanced over her shoulder one last time. "But don't forget, we know everything, and if you really want to play this game, be prepared to lose it all." The door slammed behind her with a deafening finality. I stood there, unmoving, the weight of her words heavy in the silence. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The next day, it wasn't long before I knew exactly what Veronica was capable of. The morning after she left, a package arrived. No return address, just a simple brown envelope, marked with a cold, faceless label. Lucas opened it, the tension in his shoulders evident. Inside, there was a single USB drive. No note. Just that. He plugged it into his laptop, the grainy video flickering onto the screen. Veronica, years younger, and standing in the middle of a dark room, handing over a thick envelope filled with cash. A deal. A shady exchange. Land transfers. It was illegal. My heart raced, not with fear but with purpose. This wasn't leverage. It was the truth. The truth they didn't want exposed. Lucas looked at me, stunned. Is this real? I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. I knew what I had. I knew what Veronica had done, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. We don't go to the press, I said, my voice hard with determination. Not yet. We wait. Let Veronica come to us again, and this time, we're ready. Lucas nodded, his gaze dark with understanding. He knew the path we were about to walk, but there was no turning back now. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were taking back what was ours. And Veronica? She had no idea what was coming for her. The silence in the apartment was suffocating after Veronica's departure. The weight of the words she'd left behind hung in the air like smoke, impossible to clear. I knew she'd be back. That was the thing with people like her. Their arrogance always made them believe they had the upper hand, and they didn't know what I had. They didn't know the truth I was holding, the one that would burn everything they'd built to the ground. It was in the dead of night when the package arrived. No knocking, no bell ringing, just a simple, unmarked box on the doorstep, almost invisible against the darkness. Inside it, there was no letter, no explanation. Just a USB drive. A small, insignificant piece of plastic, yet it held everything. Lucas stood over the table, the lamp casting long shadows on his face as he stared at the drive in his hand. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. This was it, the point of no return. He plugged the drive into his laptop, and the screen flickered to life, revealing grainy footage of Veronica, years younger, more naive, and far too eager to make her deal. The video was shaky, filmed from a distance, but clear enough to see her handing over a thick envelope full of cash to a man in a dark suit. Land transfers, illegal transactions, deals that would ruin the Parkers if anyone saw them. I leaned in, my breath catching in my throat. That's her. That's Veronica, I said, my voice low but steady. Lucas's face went pale as the realization sank in. This could destroy her, destroy all of them. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was right there in front of us. Veronica had thought she was untouchable, that she could threaten me and walk away unscathed. But I wasn't playing by her rules. I had my own. This isn't leverage, I whispered, my fingers tracing the edge of the laptop screen. This is truth, and truth. Truth is more powerful than any weapon. The room was still. The sound of my heartbeat was louder than the video on the screen. I could feel the power shifting, the stakes climbing higher with every second. We don't go to the press yet, I said, my voice hard with resolve. We wait. Let Veronica come to us. When she does, we'll be ready. Lucas's eyes met mine, filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Understanding, respect. He didn't say a word, but I saw it in his face. He knew what this meant. He knew the game we were playing now. The next day. Veronica didn't take long to return. The knock came just after noon, sharp and demanding. This time, she wasn't wearing the usual icy veneer. There was something different about her, something desperate. She was losing control, and it showed. I opened the door, standing there with the calmness I'd worked so hard to perfect. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. There was no pretense, no facade, just the cold, hard truth of who we both were now. You know what I'm here for, Veronica said, her voice tight. Destroy the video, now. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at her, waiting for the arrogance to slip, waiting for her to realize that this was no longer about power. This was about survival. You think you can threaten me into silence? I asked, my voice steady, unwavering. You think that video is your weapon? You think you're still in control? Her eyes flashed with anger. She was used to controlling the room, used to people bowing to her will. But I was different, and that difference terrified her. This video, it could destroy everything, Veronica said, her voice barely above a whisper. If it gets out, the family is done. Then you'll know what it feels like to lose everything, I replied, because I'm not afraid to burn it all down if I have to. She took a step back, her hand gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. She had underestimated me, just like the rest of them. She thought she could walk in, make threats, and walk out with the upper hand. But I had the upper hand now. You want mercy? I asked, my voice cold as ice. Then you'll give us what we want. Her eyes flickered to the folder I held in my hand. The folder containing the copies of the video. The leverage she never saw coming. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I said. I'm asking for your silence, for your respect, and for your distance. From me, from Lucas, from everything we've built. Veronica didn't respond immediately. Her gaze flicked to Lucas, standing in the doorway, silently watching. The tension in the room thickened, suffocating. But this time, she knew she couldn't win. Fine, she muttered, her voice strained. You've made your point. And just like that, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving me standing there, the weight of the victory settling over me like a cloak. But I knew this wasn't the end. Veronica might have backed down, but I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't over. 3 days later, the knock on the door came again, but this time it wasn't Veronica. This time, it was someone else. Someone who had been waiting in the shadows, biding their time. Lucas opened the door, his face instantly paling as he recognized the man standing there. A tall, well-dressed figure, sharp eyes hidden behind dark glasses. He was a messenger, a harbinger of what was to come. The man handed Lucas a letter. No return address, no name, just an instruction. Play this. I watched as Lucas tore open the envelope, the air in the room growing thick with tension. His hands shook slightly as he pulled out a USB drive, identical to the one Veronica had given us. He plugged it into the laptop, and the screen flickered to life. The video began. Grainy and unclear at first, but as the picture sharpened, I saw the unmistakable face of Vivian Parker, her face flushed with anger, her voice low and threatening. She was talking to a man I didn't recognize. The conversation wasn't about family, wasn't about politics. It was about something darker, something more dangerous. Money, bribes, deals that had nothing to do with the Parkers' so-called legacy. And then, there it was. A name. The man in the video spoke it. A name I didn't know. A name that connected everything. The corruption ran deeper than I ever thought. Vivian Parker was part of this, and I had the proof. I turned to Lucas, my mind already racing through the possibilities. This is bigger than we thought, I said, my voice sharp with the weight of the revelation. They're all involved. Lucas didn't answer immediately. He just stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. But I could see the fire burning behind his eyes, the same fire I'd seen in mine. And we both knew one thing. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about taking down the Parkers, exposing them, and letting the world know the truth. The knock came early. It wasn't the usual polite, reluctant tap of a visitor. No, this was different. This knock had urgency, like someone with no time to waste and no patience to hide their intent. I knew exactly who it was before I opened the door. There she was, Veronica Parker, tall, blonde, and carrying the kind of storm that could level mountains. The enforcer of the Parker family. The one who thought she could intimidate me, break me with a few choice words, and walk away unscathed. But that was before she realized who she was really up against. Her eyes cut through me like a blade. She didn't even blink when she saw the calm expression on my face. She had come here for one thing, and she wouldn't leave until she got it. I didn't speak as I opened the door. I didn't need to. The weight of the moment was enough. She stepped into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor, a sound that reminded me of the clicks of a clock ticking toward the inevitable. She walked straight past Lucas, her gaze never leaving me, until she stood just inches from where I was standing. "Give me the video," Veronica said, her voice low but dripping with venom. "Now." Her eyes flicked to the folder on the table, the same folder I had been holding for days, the one with the power to destroy them all. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "You still don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice steady, unshaken. "This video isn't your problem anymore, Veronica. It's mine." She looked at me like I had just insulted her. "You have no idea what you're doing," she hissed, stepping closer, her breath hot on my face. "You think you're in control? You think this is some game? You'll regret this." I didn't flinch. I wasn't the scared little girl they thought I was anymore. "You're right," I replied, almost casually, as if I were talking about something as mundane as the weather. "It's not a game. It's the truth. And the truth has a way of destroying everything you've built, Veronica. You think you can protect your family with threats and power plays, but I've got something far more dangerous than that." Her jaw clenched, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of fear behind those cold eyes. She took a step back, just enough for me to see the slightest crack in her armor, but it didn't last. The rage came rushing back, fiercer than before. "Listen to me," she said, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "You can't control this. You have no idea how deep this runs. You think the Parkers will let you walk away from this? You think they'll just forget?" I let the silence stretch out between us, letting her words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "You've been wrong from the start." I didn't need to explain myself. The truth was clear now. She knew it. Lucas knew it. And they all had a front-row seat to the unraveling of the Parkers' empire. Veronica's eyes blazed with fury, but I could see the panic flickering in them now. The desperation. It was a dangerous thing, this desperation, and it made people do reckless things. "You have one choice," I said, my voice calm and steady, each word carefully measured. "Leave, walk away, and let me take what's mine. Or..." I let the rest of the sentence hang in the air, unsaid but clear. There was no need to finish it. She knew exactly what would happen if she didn't back off. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me, trying to figure out if I was bluffing, if I was just a name and a face, someone she could manipulate into submission. But then, with a sudden, sharp movement, she reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a flash drive, almost identical to the one I had. It was the same size, the same shape, but it was full of something far more dangerous. A threat. The same threat I had been warned about from the moment I set foot in this house. She tossed it on the table in front of me, her eyes blazing. "You think you're the only one who has dirt on the Parkers?" she snarled. "You have no idea what you're up against." The flash drive landed with a small metallic clink on the table between us, and for a moment, neither of us moved. The air crackled with the tension of the impending war. I glanced at the flash drive, then back at her. "You think this is about revenge?" I asked, my voice soft but filled with purpose. "This isn't revenge. This is about survival. And if you think your little threats are going to stop me from taking what's rightfully mine, you've underestimated me for the last time." She froze, her face pale with a mix of anger and something else. Fear. Real fear. And it tasted so sweet I almost savored it. I leaned forward, picking up the flash drive, my fingers brushing against the cool surface. "You made a mistake, Veronica," I said quietly. "You thought you could threaten me into submission, but you didn't know me. Not really." For a moment, the room was so still it felt like the world had stopped turning. Then Veronica's face hardened. "You'll regret this," she spat, turning on her heel, her heels clicking sharply as she stormed out of the room. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She was gone. But I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The silence that followed Veronica's departure felt heavier than anything I had ever known. It was no longer just about the Parkers. It wasn't just about them and their power. It was about me. It was about the life I was building, not in their world, but in my own. I stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker like tiny stars, each one reminding me of the countless battles I had fought to get here. But this was the end of the beginning. The moment I would look back on and say, this is where everything changed. Behind me, I could hear Lucas moving in the kitchen, the faint sound of him rummaging through the drawers. He had been quiet ever since Veronica left. We both knew the storm was far from over, but the last few weeks had shattered something between us. The illusion that we were just a couple in love, living their lives. This was bigger than us now, and if I was going to survive it, if we were going to survive it, I had to make sure I didn't lose myself in the chaos. The door creaked open, and Lucas stepped into the room. His face was set, unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something he hadn't said out loud but had been fighting to keep hidden. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, hesitant. I turned slowly to face him, a single breath catching in my chest. "I'm not sure I'll ever be okay again," I said, the truth falling from my lips without hesitation. "But I'll survive. I always do." He nodded, his hands finding their way into his pockets. "I don't think I've fully processed all of this." "What's happening? What you've done? You've brought them all down, and now it's real." I took a step toward him, the weight of his words heavy in the air. "It's real, Lucas. But it's not just about tearing them down. It's about building something new, something they can't touch." He reached out, his hand finding mine. The touch was gentle, the first moment of connection between us since this all started. I could feel his confusion, his fear, but I could also feel the flicker of understanding beginning to rise in him. "The Parkers may have built this empire, but we'll rebuild it in our image. One where we don't have to play by their rules. One where we create our own legacy." His eyes met mine, his gaze fierce now, matching the fire that burned in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I saw the man I had fallen in love with, the one who had stood by me, even when the world crumbled around us. "You're not doing this alone, Sophie," he said, his voice steady with newfound resolve. "I'm with you, all the way." The words echoed in the silence of the room, but this time, they were more than just words. They were a promise. And in that moment, something between us solidified. Not just our bond, but the foundation of something stronger than either of us had ever imagined. Together, we weren't just surviving the storm, we were creating something better. I smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of my lips. "Then let's make sure the world knows exactly who we are." 1 month later. The headlines came, one by one. The scandal, the corruption, the fall of the Parker family from their pedestal. It wasn't just a family drama. It wasn't just about who would inherit what. It was about power, control, and the deep rot that ran through their empire. But buried deep in the articles, in the chaos of it all, was one truth that couldn't be ignored. Ava Monroe, Sophie Bennett, was no longer a footnote. She was the one who had shattered the Parkers' legacy. She was the one who had taken the truth and used it to carve out her own future. The press was full of it. They didn't know what to make of me, and I was fine with that. I didn't need them to understand. In the quiet of the night, as I stood in front of our apartment window, looking out at the skyline that was now mine to shape, I realized something. The Parkers had built their empire on lies, on bloodlines, on power handed down like a crown. But I had built mine on truth, on resilience, on knowing exactly who I was, and using that to carve out my own place in the world. I heard the door behind me open. Lucas stepped in, his presence solid, like a constant I could always count on. He crossed the room and stood beside me, his hand finding mine once more. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with pride. I looked at him, smiling softly. "We did it." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to look over my shoulder. The legacy I was building wasn't just mine. It was ours.